beginning of over with biggest part of it, I hope, that's going on, flu virus or whatever it is. So it's good to have all of you. Those of you who attended our Sunday school, we're glad to have all of you. And today is a day that our bulletin stands out. Those of you that have heading on there where it says, then a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." And the scripture was read from Luke chapter 9, verse 28 through 36. And there's a little bit of it that is included, 37 to 43. And an interesting writing from Luke tells about the transfiguration, the changes, something that took place in the eyes of part of the disciples, maybe 1/4 of the disciples. I don't know how that could be, but the Lord knew just who to have him on his side as he went to worship in prayer up in the mountain. You know, the scripture has already been read, so I will try to cover in that reading, which tells about this event that took place with Jesus and the disciples who had been with him. He only picked Peter, James, and John, so 3 of them, and goes into this mountain to pray. And I was thinking of how, you know, there was 9 more of the disciples that was not chosen to come along with Jesus. There must have been a reason. You know, John was a messenger, chosen disciples of the Lord. And Peter seems to have been a well-known spokesperson of the group. And James, who was also one of the dearest, close, working relationship with Jesus. And as they went with the Lord up into this mountain, and Luke says that when he prayed, and this was the way he worshiped his Father, and to worship God, the Creator, his Father, it must have been a moment of very important time and occasion for Jesus to be in prayer with his Father. And at that moment, when he prayed, his robe began to change, and it was white, and there are 2 translations about that. It was glistening, and there was, so bright and white, and the robes that Jesus wore. And at the moment, there was 2 persons that appeared, and they recognized him as Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and speak about Jesus as they were in conversation about his death, which should be accomplished at Jerusalem. Peter, John, and James were about that time began to sleep and were heavy with being so sleepy. And so off and on, it seems like they go off to sleep while Jesus was meeting with Moses and Elijah that appeared. and in a conversation there together, not too far off from where the three disciples were, and saw the glory of a beautiful sight that it was. But you know, at that very moment, with being so tired and sleepy, you know, sometimes we get that way, even in our own life. And as this was happening, and the two persons that had appeared had begun to leave from their sight. And Peter says to Jesus, it is good for us to be here. Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles. There's another translation that uses the word booth. Let us build 3 booths. And says one for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for you. And Luke says, Peter said this, not really knowing what he was saying. Just out of his sleep, and what he saw, is it real? Not being sure. I guess you could call that pretty much like a nightmare. But it was something that happens in their presence, that when they ended their conversation, and as Peter had said, it is good for us to be here, and all of a sudden there came a cloud, a vapor of cloud. You know, in recent days we had this fog that came, and you couldn't hardly see very far when it's so foggy. So those similar to that, and a cloud that appeared, and it just made them hard to see one another in that moment, and they began to fear of what is taking place. And out of this great vast fog, like a cloud that appeared, a voice comes. A voice they hear is saying that, this is my beloved Son, hear him. And when they had finished hearing this word that came, they seemed to have not much to say. It seems like whether to believe what they see or what. But there was a thought in their minds about what is taking place here that they see. And so the event ended there, and then the next day they came down from this mountain, and there were people who gathered, waiting upon the Lord, and the 3 disciples that had left for the mountains for prayer. As among this crowd, there was a man from the crowd who cried out, saying, Master, I beseech thee, look upon my son, for he is the only child. And the Spirit taketh him, and suddenly he would cry out, and it would tear him, bruising him, hardly departing from him. It just not seemed to have leave him alone. This kind of illness and sickness was known as the demonic, possessed by demonic. And the man says, I have brought it to your disciples to cast him out, but they could not. And Jesus says, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and suffer you? Bring your son to me. And so the father, bringing his son towards Jesus, And before they could come close to Jesus, Luke tells how the devil threw him down and terrorized him. And Jesus rebukes the unclean spirit and healed the child and delivered him to his father.